It's from Florida. Some breaking news now. The Scott campaign, this is heading to a manual recount in the Senate race in Florida. They are alleging that the Broward County supervisor, Brenda Snipes, as we told you at the top of the show, missed the deadline by 2 minutes to submit Broward County's recount number because the Scott campaign is saying that it would invalidate those numbers because in that count, they say Rick Scott picked up 779 votes. In other words, he lost less than Nelson did. And with the late submission blamed on an official who didn't know how to use the website to send them to the state, Broward's results kick back to the unofficial pre-recount total, which would put Nelson back 779 closer. That's where we are. That's where we are tonight, waiting for the latest out of the Nelson campaign and from Ms. Snipes, who walked out of the room soon after that deadline was missed. We're back with the panel. Byron, this is, it's kind of nuts. The whole thing is nuts. It is kind of nuts, and we don't know the truth of what the Scott campaign is saying, but the fact is this machine recount has not really helped Democrats. The whole idea was that it would help Democrats, and then in the case of the Senate race, it would go on to a hand recount. The governor's race is over now. That it didn't make a big difference, and Ron DeSantis is going to be the governor of Florida. The thing is, in this Senate race, Scott's lead is about 12,500 votes. We've all heard there have been 26 statewide recounts since the year 2000. 3 of them changed the result, and those changed in terms of hundreds of votes, not thousands of votes. And so there's no practical sense in which somehow Bill Nelson picks up more than 12,500 votes in this. And it's, AB, it's interesting. All day long, Broward was saying, we're going to make the deadline, we're going to make the deadline, and then they miss it by 2 minutes, and it turns out that there was a net gain for Scott. I mean,
if you look back at Brenda Snipes' career, she was brought in by former Governor Jeb Bush because the person before her was a disaster.
She was a Democrat, though, we should point out.
Well, he replaced a Democrat with a Democrat. That's something Rick Scott could have done. I hold him fully accountable for the state of the voting system in Florida today. It's on him. And poor Ron DeSantis better clean it up in the next 2 years. But this is pathetic. Brenda Snipes has had a very spotty record, and she finally, Palm Beach didn't come in on time. She finally gets it in with 2 minutes to spare. Rick Scott is ahead. He's going to win this. I just think he's been incredibly petty. This isn't there's no evidence of fraud here. Rick Scott has.
What do you mean? He's up, and she doesn't turn in the vote by 2 minutes over?
You know what? Let the courts decide.
You have to concede that this counting and Brenda Snipes turning it in 2 minutes late to isn't that kind of crazy?
I think that Brenda Snipes should not be in this entire thing because she's a problem, and I put that on Rick Scott.
Not on Jeb Bush.
She is in the position.
No, Jeb Bush. Okay, Jeb Bush hired her, and then her spotty record went all the way to this close election because of Rick Scott. Look, he could have replaced her with someone else, a Democrat. Right. I'm exasperated by this. I put it on Rick Scott. He's the governor of Florida.
I want to play something else, and this is on the Georgia race. This is Hillary Clinton and Sherrod Brown.
Know Stacey well. She was one of my really strong surrogates in the campaign. If she'd had a fair election, she already would have won.
If Stacey Abrams doesn't win in Georgia, they stole it. It's clear. It's clear. And I say that publicly. It's clear.
Okay, they say it's clear. The race in Georgia for governor, the separation is 54,966 votes. When anyone mentions any irregularities or anything possibly considering possible fraud or any problems, it is suddenly you're undermining the system. Yet when these two high-profile Democrats say it about Georgia, it's somehow okay.
And that, as we've seen with headlines about people talking about the Florida issues and the Broward County history there, in this situation with Hillary Clinton, Sherrod Brown, there's no evidence to prove that there's any fraud going on in Georgia, and yet there is a boatload of evidence to show that the law has not been followed in Florida.
Or at least irregularities.
But we also know that based on the deadlines that have not been met. That is a breach of Florida election law. They have not been following the deadlines that they are required to by law, including tonight. And if Brenda Snipes and her officials are going to argue that they had problems as election officials with submitting results to the Secretary of State website because they didn't know how to use the website, they deserve to all be fired. I agree with you that Ron DeSantis has an obligation to go in and look and do a full accounting of whether these rules, laws, and regulations are being followed in Florida.
2020 is around the corner. When we come back.